ki tēnei hui. Ko Catherine McAlpine aho. Ko aho te hea mana o te wahine o Tamaki Makaurau. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. A special welcome to Julia Whaipooti. I remember how excited I was in 2018 to follow Julia's trip to the United Nations and hear her amazing speech, totally blown away. We're honoured to have her here with us tonight. Welcome, Julia. We are also privileged to have the wonderful Stacey Morrison, such a warm and skilled interviewer. We are grateful for all the important work you do and what a great friend you are to the Auckland Women's Centre. And finally, a big welcome to all of you who have taken time out of your busy lives to join this Kōrero. This is our fourth Wahine Toa Forum this year, designed to provide an opportunity for us all to hear from Wahine Māori thought leaders. I'll now hand over to Stacey to do a formal welcome for us. Thanks, Stacey.
Kia ora tātou. Karanga te rangi e tū nei, karanga te papa e takoto nei. Rarange hia mai te ira atua, rarange hia mai tua wahine. Ko hine ahuone, ko hine tītama, ko hine rauwhārangi, ko hine te iwa, ko au e tū nei ko tātou e hui nei. Ue hātau mai te Māori, haumi e hui e tai ki. I've just invoked the essence of all of our female atua from our very beginnings, our origins, our places that really feed us as wahine. Nō reira nau mai, whakapiri mai. Welcome to this space, welcome to this kōrero. All of the reasons that have brought you here, ngā tūpuna, kai o koutou taha, e mihi atu nei, e mihi atu nei. And I recognise all of your ancestors with you tonight, and I recognise the mana o hikurangi maunga, tū mai rā, Julia Whaipooti nau mai, whakapiri mai. Thank you for bringing such excitement to people who are ready to listen to your kōrero, to enjoy everything that you bring, because I know that when you came on the scene, I was like, this is exciting. This is te tira hou. And you really are an example of the generation of wahine Māori that to me are the fulfillment of a lot of dreams. And you embody things that we'd hoped for our people. And you know, that reside in all of us, but not all of us can speak the way that you do. So he arero koi, he inati te wahine nei, so sharp, insightful, witty kōrero, no pressure at all. What about the PR for this particular piece? Tēnei ka mihi ki a koe, Julia, kai a koe te wā, ki te mihi atu ki te whakameninga e hui mai nei.
Pai, tēnā koe e te tōkana mihi atu ki a koe, o tira ki a koutou, ko tai mai nei I o taua, kōrero anai nei. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko au he Julia Whaipooti aho, no Ngati Porou aho, tēnā koutou katoa. Real privilege to get to come and have a kōrero, and with you, Stacey, a big mihi to you tōkana for, that was a big mihi to the Auckland Women's Centre. Man, I'm really into the introductions. They sound really flat. I was like, babe, look at this, showing my wife, and it was like charismatic advocate. I was like, man, I sound cool, but it's cool. It's cool to be with you, Stacey, and the work that you do as our mana wahine, to see you and to be inspired by you and the mahi you do for our whānau and peoples. I look up to you a lot, and so it's really a comfortable space to get to come and speak with you. I will see it in that way, and for all of you who have come along to have a listen, I think that's it's a privileged space to be given the mic in different spaces, and I will use that as best I can. So tēnā koutou.
Tēnā rawa atu koe. And thank you also for reminding me of some housework for me to do. I'd like to say in terms of housekeeping these days, I just call it land back. But in terms of a few details, you can see Laura and Bridie our interpreters, and Julia has already introduced herself, making sure that everybody can understand. I wonder, Julia, could you just show us again your sign for Ngati Porou and how you came to understand that?
I was privileged to get to work with some tangata tūri, with some whānau tūri, and Whaia Karen Poynton, who some of you may know, gifted, has taught me some kōrero. And so what I understood, and Laura, you're the expert here, so you can correct me, but this represents, I love sign because it's so literal. It has a real awesome meaning. I'm a pipi in that reo. So it's a tangata, and this is like your iwi, so it's a whānau and people around you. And for Porou, so it's Ngati, it's like a P, but it's actually because we're the first place to see the sun. And so it's where the sun rises. So I can't forget that. It's a really, it was a cool way how that was explained to me. And also Kuka Karen gifted me my sign name, which is this. And some of you might think that's because I'm some kind of super Māori, but actually it's because we spent some time together at Ahui, that also where I was lucky enough to meet Laura for the mahi that she does and the tautoko she does with whānau tūri. It's because Whaia Karen saw me on my phone a lot, like talking with my hands. And so she decided that was my sign name.
Goodbye. And I have a brother-in-law who's tangata tūri, and he's so observant that I'm always horrified at how good his impersonations are of me as well. So yeah, I might not ask him to give me a name like that.
Yeah,
but this Ngātini o, the meaning of Ngati Porou, I won't forget that either. And I just to add on to that, Eleanor's now put in the chat a link for some feedback that we'd love for you to have. And if we can all ask some questions as well. We have questions that have already been sent in, but if you'd like to ask some questions, we do have a bit of allocated time for that. And because you're all incredible wahine, I know you can multitask and listen. You're probably feeding someone or yourself and doing multiple other things while we kōrero, because that's how we roll. Julia, tell us about the space where you are in right now, because I'm envious about your Zoom background. Are you in your office?
I am in my whare, in our lounge room. The kitchen's just to the side. I did just get kicked out of the office. My wife, Emma Wiley, is doing mahi. And so she said, can you not be in the office? So this is where I am. I'm in my lounge, but it's a beautiful place to be. Got Kuka Robin Kahukiwa behind me, and the reminder of all things that I think are the kaupapa we talk about and breathe. Painting from my nephews, just surrounded by poka poka and mātauranga and aroha from whānau. So I'm right in the centre of my lounge in our whare in Pōniki.
Tēnā koe. But tell us about your journey, which may be surprising to some people in terms of where you grew up or the places that you grew up.
Right, so I was born in Gisborne, and on my papa's side, so both my parents are Ngati Porou, my papa's at Aotearoa, mum's Arawa in Wharekahika, but we were in Aotearoa just before Cyclone Bowler hit, and my parents, particularly my mum, may surprise you, come from strong, directive women, decided for our whānau that we needed to move for mahi, for opportunity. And so we moved to Australia when I was a pipi. I think I would have been about, it changes every time I tell the story, but it's like 1, 2, 3. I was a pipi. I don't remember. We moved to Australia. And so I grew up my first half of my life over in Australia. When we arrived there, my mum, well, I probably could say it's too late, but enrolled my dad in the police. So fraudulently, like just enrolled him, signed for him, and then received a letter and was like, Dad, you start police college. And then so my dad, we followed him around a bit around Australia for his police training and where his work took him, so around Queensland. But that's where I grew up in my younger years until I was about 14, 15, we moved home.
Why did she decide that he should go to police college?
It's really simple. It's not, it's about mahi, putting kai on the tepu, what was a career, a mahi that could do that, a job that could do that. And so my mum, back then, actually, I've never really asked her, but I know that she would have just been like, she probably enrolled him in lots of things, and the police probably got back first, to be honest. She would have just done that, and he followed. It wouldn't have been some kind of big sort of reason, just be like, we're here now, we need to get busy. My mum's very, very makes stuff happen, you know, and sometimes I complain about that a lot, but actually I can see the gifts of that and how things have happened in our lives and in our whānau structure. And I can see my mother reflected in me now that we're talking about it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting as these things unravel, you go, and that is also me. But
Yeah.
It's interesting that the police come into your life in that way, and you have this very intimate insight then, yet justice and law are not always the same thing, and they've been a huge part of your life. So I guess before we speak to all your mahi in those places, I've read that you said growing up in Australia gave you, I guess you didn't have a weight or a responsibility as other Māori do. Can you speak to that for us?
Well, to say, when my dad was a police officer, that meant nothing to me. Like, it was, in terms, he was my papa who happened to be a policeman. So it was not an intimate part of our lives in terms of, I suppose, you know, some of the mahi I do, or the interests where it turned more acutely to justice and stuff like that. But related is the fact that when we came home, so we moved, and it was related actually to one of my whānau who got deported from Australia, actually, and he got sent back to New Zealand, and we moved for that reason, to be closer on a whānau sense. But I grew up very confident, and I still am these things, but very confident, very secure. I had a knowledge, I'm Ngati Porou, I had a knowledge I'm Māori. Retrospectively, when we came back, I did not feel that as acutely as in my whole life. Then when we moved back to Aotearoa, and we ended up in the South Island. I don't have any whakapapa or known whakapapa there, but we were there for my last few years of college, and I was never so aware of how Māori I was, because I was in a particular Pākehā community, I guess, and I was often seen as, or I felt that way, where I was held up as a good Māori within the school, and it really confused me as to why this was happening. And then I'm 15, 16, these are quite formative years, 14, 15, 16, where you're questioning stuff and you've got attitude. My attitude hasn't left me yet, but where I was getting feelings about it, I was like, I'm good because I'm good, not because I'm Māori. And I found this weird sort of situation going on, and my righteousness and my confidence, I think retrospectively, I can recognize the point of difference where I feel really strong about speaking up in different spaces, besides my inherited confidence that my mum's given me in whānau and tipuna as a wahine Māori, is because I realize in a short time coming back to New Zealand, then going to uni and all that kind of stuff, that I didn't grow up with the baggage of being Māori that I think that New Zealand has for our people and our whānau. There is a negativity in how being Māori, what that means for us and our identities. And I feel that every time I've gone overseas, when I've had the privilege to go away for different kaupapa, overseas love Māori. They love New Zealand for Māori. And I realized the love for Māori doesn't feel like it exists here at home. And I didn't grow up with that knowledge or with that hurt. And I also know when Mum took us away, part of it was she grew up with that, and she didn't want it for our whānau, for her kids. I mean, her name's Mai, and I never knew that was her name till we moved back, because she just named herself Bara, because that's what people could pronounce. I didn't know those things, but part of moving away, yes, it was a mahi, but it was also, she wanted the best for us kids, which is putia, to put kai on the tepu, but also to protect us from being Māori. And I have felt that in our journey in my adulthood, and to the point where both Mum and I carry our moko kauai now, but I didn't realise how much the burden of being Māori was for my parents' experience, and how they wanted to protect us from that, and how we've shifted since I've come home and decided not, to do, I suppose, what whatever it is that I am lucky to do.
The many things. I actually grew up in the environment that you're talking about in the South Island, that particular place, and I was also called a good Māori, which is othering to say that most of us aren't, right? But I heard Coco Sola describe it as rewriting history with the pen of backhanded compliments. So that's understanding that othering, and yet you always felt strongly and aroha, obviously, for all of us, and didn't want to take on that role of being called good. Is that right? So you had that critical analysis at a young age.
Yeah, definitely. I was like annoyed because I found it annoying because I was like, what are you saying that I didn't know, what does that actually mean? And when you're young, you can't articulate what that means, but what you've just said is exactly that. It's an expectation that Māori shouldn't be achieving, and however a Pākehā system or the Pākehā in the world that I was exposed to measure achievement. So it was a surprise, and I just kept questioning, why was this a surprise? And those sorts of years, and then eventually when I ended up at law school, and then you're surrounded within a very Pākehā institution, and it looks colonial, as it looks magnificent, and it also is very all the things. It's a confusing way to be developing your thinking, and I think my advocacy or awareness and political awareness of te tiriti foundations of this country, our relationships, our positioning as Māori, my positioning as a whānau, and as Māori as well, what does that all look like? Those were all being developed at the same time as I was being exposed. I'm being forced actually into thinking, why am I a good Māori? Or even the fact that I was going to law school was this amazing thing, just a constant reminders that somehow I was not meant to do that. And then the question that underpins that, or the expectation that underpins that, is that Māori should not be doing that. And it made me annoyed because I was like, my whānau's Māori, my parents are Māori, or my cousin, and I was like, yeah, they annoy me too, but we're cool, we're good people. I don't understand where this thinking was coming from. I mean, I have articulations of it now. I'm really clear about what that looks like, but it is a burden, thinking about it.
Yes, because as you're saying, when a young person is being influenced by that, they might not be able to articulate what they're experiencing, but it's formative on where they believe they belong in the world. Now, how do you articulate what that is?
It's very clearly, it's racism, it is white supremacy, and it is colonization. All of those things are interlinked. It is, we exist on a foundation in a country that is built off, there's a few things, there's our New Zealand's along the shortest colonized sort of country. We have a strong presence as tangata whenua. I do think the signing of Te Tiriti was a promise of relationship, that I do think Te Puna tangata whenua ends tangata tiriti, and mainly white New Zealand, at that time it was Pākehā, it was white New Zealand, agreed and signed to. I do think there was good intentions by our sets of ancestors. I do think there was a period of time where there was an expectation of a relationship, and what does that look like? Pretty much you white fellas look after your white fellas. They're getting a bit hoha and rowdy, and us, sharing gifts and tools. And then obviously that did not last long. And so when we have a foundation of that, where our tepuna were taken, our tonga, on taha Māori, were the powers to make decisions for ourselves were taken away, that the promise of Te Tiriti has never been acknowledged. And even beyond, that's not even just Te Tiriti, it's just rights as humans. We're not recognised as people of equal footing. That has flow-on effect to how our systems and structures exist today, and how what we see as being normalised, I think expressions of racism and white supremacy are very, very normalised. Now that we can't recognise it as that in Aotearoa, we just expect it to be as as it is. But those are the foundations that I think underpin those kinds of expectations of not just me, but who I represent, you know, as whānau Māori. That's what that looks like. And those are the things we have to really consciously challenge. And I think to my, you know, tōkana Tina Ngata, you know, has been really articulate about these things, but sometimes it's really hard to be articulate about shit. But racism, colonization, white supremacy, and the failure in every respect to acknowledge and honour te tiriti.
Right. And the exceptionalism put on you as a Māori woman because you can excel in many different areas. And Catherine's just put in the chat a mention of what Moana Jackson did say: treaties are made to be honoured, not to be settled.
Aye.
So the honouring of the treaty is something we could spend our entire time talking about. But when did your understanding of te tiriti begin? Because you said, I ended up in university, but actually that was something your mum reminded you every day as she made breakfast, didn't she? And when you go to university.
Pretty much. Like, I didn't know what te tiriti was. I didn't know what that was growing up. You don't know it. Like, I didn't learn about it until halfway through law school. It was just sort of this learning of a thing. But yeah, I ended up at uni because mum told me to. Like, I was first in my whānau, go to uni and all of that kind of stuff. But that was mum's, I mean, in her decision making in moving us to Australia, enrolling dad in the police, all of that kind of stuff was all driven by what's good for our whānau, like what she thought would be good for us kids. And growing up, she used to tell me it'd be so annoying. It'd be like make a coffee or whatever, and you're going to university. It was just a knowledge I carried with me, because for mum, education would be the key for our whānau not to struggle in the way that she did. So to give us kids a better life. So I just knew I had to go to uni. Don't know why I didn't know, but I just knew that. So it was a thing I didn't do out of my own volition, sort of thing. When I did end up in law school, of course you learn about these things, and it just kind of pissed me off. Particularly like a very significant moment for me where I can look to it and go, it was a moment where I decided I had to sharpen exactly why this was happening. It was like my second year criminal law class, and it's in a lecture theatre of about 200 people, predominantly Pākehā, talking about why Māori are criminals, or like, why are we in prison? And I was just, again, sitting there, and there's probably a handful of us scattered. When you get to law school, us, which like brown people, but particularly we find ourselves, and then we like have this little whāngai, like whoever, you know, we just all hang out together because there's not a lot of us and we want to try and exist in that space, but
survive.
Yeah. Well, I was just like, why are they talking about it? Like there's something inherently criminal about being Māori. And there was a discussion that was happening. I felt really uncomfortable about it. I felt quite emotional about it. And then at the same time, there was like a presentation about the statistics, which when I saw them was so violently shocking to me, and they remain violently shocking to me, and I will never be okay with it, but that half of our prison population are Māori. So I was having these conversations, hearing people talk about why Māori are criminals or why we offend, me being Māori being like, no, we're not, like, and then also thinking of some whānau who are inside, but I'm also like, there's heaps of us that aren't. And then also looking at those statistics and being like, what the hell? Why has no one done anything about this? You know, like I was like, why is that true? It's also true that being Māori doesn't mean we're criminal, but also it's true you fellas are talking like this. So that kind of melting pot, all in the course of one class, just like lit my fire up, where I was like, that's not okay. It's not okay talking like that. It's not okay we're like that. And then also I had to address that front on for me and be like, okay, well, what do we have to do? Because that's wrong. And then with that, I suppose then you have to like, I was like, why is it like that? And then that was a time to focus and engage more intentionally about like, well, why is that? And then you look at our history, you look at the whakapop of this country as to why it is like that. And it's by design now, you know, it's not just done by accident and doesn't continue by accident, which is why it's intentional that I think many of us have to work to deconstruct it. It was constructed that way. Our whānau will be locked up that way. not just in the physical prisons, it's actually the social, our mana socially to exist in the relationship with this land and with tangata tiriti, how do we exist here? And we have a right to exist here fully in our own potential. And it's going to take some time to undo some of those structures that have enabled that.
Yeah, that enable a comment like Māori criminals more often, because that's where, when you say something like white supremacy, that there has to be an underlying belief that there is an inferiority in Māori, right, to be able to say something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there really is, and our structures and systems reflect that. I mean, we look at government, when they might name themselves a Māori name, they've got the Treaty of Waitangi and all their policies, or they make a Māori role, but will they give resource over to Māori? Will they trust Māori to do the work that they have not been able to do and can't do? No, they don't, but they will. That's a reflection of a lack of trust in Māori. Like, that still happens today. And so, yeah, there's an inherent distrust in our ability to serve our own people. And there is an inherent distrust in, well, it's not inherent distrust. I mean, that's how racism and white supremacy lives on. I mean, we can't, using those words, people are incredibly challenged by that. But if we don't confront it, then we're not going to, we can't address it. I think we have to actively be deconstructing those very lived realities that we have in our history and current day. Nothing will change unless we activate and push for those changes.
And I guess I keep on coming back to Moana Jackson, and I suspect that will be okay with you, when he also said, in response to these things that rightly fire you up at law school, one of his responses was, a mokopuna is a mokopuna. So when you look at people who are in prison and understand that they're a mokopuna, then that's looking at them in a completely different way. What does that speak to you in terms of your mahi and how we regard our people who are in prison?
It's I always carry that. I'm unapologetically, how is this affecting our whānau? Where are they in this? This is all, it's all I think about. I mean, so I practiced as a lawyer for just a few years. And I think about, I was going in and out of one of our prisons and meeting with tāne, with men who were not for whatever they had done that put them there, but to support them to clear up legal barriers and issues they would face on their way out. And in a period of a very short time, I saw a man, his father, and his koro, all for different things. And it was in that experience, I was in that time, I was particularly, when I realized that I was I can't do this. As a lawyer, I was no matter what I do for these whānau, there will be more. And I could look at these men. I saw my brother and my father, I saw my whānau. So for me, and it's not just those, when I think of whānau. That does not mean, I'm also realistic, within our own whānau, we get hōhā with each other, it's it does not take away that shit has happened, but they are still ours. And I think about Matua Moana, and when he's always talked about it, they are ours, they belong to us, we belong to them. And how foreign it is that you have prison structures that as Māori, that the punishment or whatever is to just sever someone completely from the world that they're accountable to, the relationships, the connections, all of that kind of stuff. I'm fiercely, I think, I carry my moko on my face, and I think I am the moko of my tipuna, I'm the reflection of our puna, and I will be the puna for our mokos. And that is how I think about our whānau when I'm not here. I'm not saving them. I am them and they are me. And that is my, how I apply myself. even when I'm sitting in an office in Wellington and then I'm surrounded by mostly not Māori talking about our whānau, I am always thinking about our whānau and not at this table.
Do you think
how are these decisions and the discussion affecting our whānau?
No. Do you think it's sustainable to be a lawyer? Like you say, you didn't do it for a long time. Is it sustainable to hold those beliefs in that aroha for our people? And I will speak to Mokopuna and your way you just described it. Is it sustainable to be a Māori lawyer in that current environment?
Well, it wasn't for me. But it is for some of my mates who are in there. I think the bit where it's it has to be sustainable, we all have, is to know that we can't do the whole thing in the sphere that we occupy. I think the tool of colonization means that we can be in lanes and we are distracted into that lane. We have to give as much as we can in that lane, but that lane will never we will never reach the potential or the ability to exercise tino rangatiratanga within our prisons or within the court system or within pohipera, like depending whatever our mahi is. We need to be connected and bring ourselves out. You have to bring yourself out and then be go back into your Wairoa top-up pools, whoever you're accountable to. It is not sustainable. I always go back to the question though, whether it's lawyering or teachering, is that a word? Teachering, being a teacher. Other rings, whether you're, cleaning whare, whatever the mahi is. I remember the words of Matu Moana, which he said to many first-year tauira Māori, who'd be like, are you a lawyer who happens to be Māori, or are you Māori who happens to be a lawyer? And I was like, bro, same question. When I first heard that, I was like, I mean, I understand, but cool story, bro. Sort of like that in the beginning, but I understand that completely. So if you've got Māori heart and how you practice as Māori, if that's your first, our first starting point, then in those jobs, to be sustainable in that, you do have to hold yourself safe and accountable in smaller circles, because it is not sustainable. We have to make it sustainable in order that we can serve in the places that we choose to serve. And if you feel that it is costing you too much awairua or in any way, then you have to leave, because then our service is munted as well. And I made that decision really early on that I couldn't do that individual advocacy on that level. I'm not even gonna lie, I felt very challenged. I remember, feeling like I either had to not care, and I could find myself, you can find yourself just being ruthless because that's the right way to do a thing. But actually I was just I can't do this, because there's just our whānau, that's how I saw it. I was like, our whānau are everywhere in here with very little choice. So then I've shifted into, how do I break that place? But we still need whānau, and we have whānau in there who are serving, because every single day, our papas, our brothers, our sons, our mamas, our daughters are being taken into these places. And so they're not lost, but they're in this process that we need whānau supporting good people working in there. We ahako nohea, doesn't matter if you're Māori or not, you need to be working well to support our whānau in those places within a very limited and I think munted system that causes more harm.
No. So that's part of the responsibility that you talked about in growing up in Australia wasn't the same, because here, being the Māori who happens to be a lawyer rather than the lawyer who happens to be Māori has all of these things and feelings and approaches. And I'll just share with you an opportunity that we had as a whānau, and I was able to advocate and you know what, the most amazing thing that particular day was that my whānau member stood in front of Judge Hemi Taumaunu. And that was the difference in terms of the result. And so we said as a whānau that we would have, that I wanted to have this person live with us and be with us and be okay with us. And Judge Taumaunu said, there is nothing that this court can offer this person that is better than what he's being offered by his whānau. And he needs to be in that environment with te reo and tikanga around him. Now, I don't say that to go, aren't we great? I say that because that day I felt happy and sad. Sad because there's so many of our people who don't have that privilege that a judge would listen to them like we were listened to that day. So when you look at different forms of structures, And Catherine's just asked the question, is there a place for prisons in terms of, I guess, what is called justice, especially for whānau Māori?
No, there's no place for prisons for Māori or non-Māori. There's just no place for prisons. I'll be really clear about this. It's very different from saying there's no place for accountability. What all the evidence research, I know there's lots of books over here, someone's read them, written them, but shows is that prisons, what you do, it's a band-aid. We spend billions every year. We spend more in 2 years in the cost of running in the bricks and mortar of a prison than we have in total treaty settlements. So I'll just put that out there in terms of economic terms. We are very happy housing Māori in prisons in that way, but knowing that if we put them in there, we send them out with without changing the outside world, without addressing any of the social conditions, with a far less opportunity of getting a mahi or anything like that. And often people then go on to offend more because we haven't changed anything. So prisons are actually a place where, for me, it festers harm. And I mean, I also think, you're talking about, Stacey, about fronting Judge Taumanu or going to a court with as a whānau. I've had very close whānau who hurt our whānau. We are the same. So in the Pākehā system, he is the offender. And the safest place for him to have gone without any kind of accountability was, he didn't have to feel the wrath of our whānau. It's not the wrath like we're just going to give him a hiding. Like, yeah, probably definitely did want to, but it's actually that accountability and that connection and the hara. He didn't have to live with that. It was everyone on the outside that was left with the hara he had done and he had gone away. There's a violent separation of people. It's a removal of people, but it's a fiction because they get put back and they get put back with different connections. We know that lots of whānau, you have to survive differently inside. It is a very organized, I think when I was on the Justice Advisory Group a few years ago, when I was much younger, because I thought oh, great, the government wants to listen to us, so we just got to tell them what to do, they'll do it. Anyway, I learned the hard way, that's not how it works. But talking with lots of different whānau, and I remember Mama, her boy went inside at 17 because he didn't have a driver's license, and they live in an area where you don't really have it. So it was multiple sort of offending, ended up just being housed in prison temporarily, came out with a bulldog on his face. There's no going back for that, for the reason how that boy ended inside. And he had good whānau, good support. They even tried to bring him kai to prison. Those are the stories that sit with me. And I think the alternatives that actually always get chucked back is what about these really heinous specific things? They happen, and there needs to be accountability. There needs to be, in some instances, there does need to be a removal from society in a way that's completely closed off, but it needs to be done. That aside, if we think broadly about the harm, the billions of dollars we spend on this festering, harmful environment, which is prisons, that is not what keeps our country and our people healthy. It does not keep the order of our whānau well. That, for me, is what safety looks like. The current process is not that. There is no place for prisons at all. We need to, it's not even reimagine. We talk about reimagining, but the question for everyone listening here is can you imagine a society without prisons? What would that look like? It is not about the building. It is not about the building. It is about a place where people can have the opportunity and whānau to thrive, to reach potentials, to deal with hara in ways that actually address the issues of offending that happen now. I'm not romantic about we just all need to hang out and have houses and crime, whatever. Yes, actually that would reduce a lot of crime for sure. But actually,
can you just explain hara for anyone who doesn't understand? Because as a key value of our Māori, like someone just said, we didn't have prison before colonization because we had that deep understanding of a hara and who it impacted when you did something like that. Could you please explain hara?
The way I'm using it is it's the harm that was done, and the harm is not done by an individual to an individual. The harm sits, for me, you know, it's like a harm has been caused, and it will continue to sit there. You know, when someone gets removed, they get put in prison for causing a harm. So whether that's violence in the whānau, whether that's a tāne assaulting and being violent within his partner, you know, it's a very common situation. That harm that man has done, and that to that wahine has been done to the whānau, you know, like that's, for me, like it doesn't remove the harm, it doesn't stop, it pauses the harm, the potential of that specific harm happening in that moment in time. But too often then that man gets released out without addressing what caused that, who is responsible for that, and without truly addressing who is responsible for that. And then, that's how I use it and think about it.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of if we rewrite the script on the boy who just didn't have a license, not a massive world-ending kind of crime, how could things have been different without prison? What would you reimagine?
Oh, well, that one's an easy one, but unfortunately it happens too often. It would just be like, get him a license, you know, pay for it. I know that there are programs in place now, and like we sort of have them set up through our justice system, but actually what in its simplest form, put the pūtea in communities that understand their communities, just give them the money to sort out that stuff. Recognize what is a social issue and is it actually inherently harmful to society. When we can look at a harm and go, you know, like some of the things that hurts my heart, you know, like mamas, whānau getting done because they stole meat packs from the supermarket. And that is wrong, actually, but what is wrong is that we have whānau who can't feed their whānau. So what is the solution to that? We spend thousands like putting them through a justice process or system. I'm just like, okay, cool, just pay for that kai. Pay for that kai and then work with that whānau to go, all right, what support do we need to put in place? Like those are the alternatives of the social issues. Most things are social issues that speak to a poverty of resource within community and within whānau. The simplest thing, honestly, like think about all the reviews, I've been part of reviews, all the things that have gone on, just knock them over, take the money, put them straight to whānau. That will be the most transformative change we could have than having like, no offense, all the policy wonks, including myself, like sitting in offices talking about it. That would be the most transformation. Put money in the hands of whānau, you know, like that's the fastest thing I could think that would change. That would change.
And also, not having to adhere, because we know that the police officer will not adhere to that particular law for everybody. They go, okay, sort it out for some people and other people.
We know that fact. I mean, if we think about, we just know factually different outcomes for Māori through our processes, different outcomes in terms of whether they will be charged, whether they will be prosecuted, whether or not they're given a second chance. I do want to acknowledge, like, there's very different. The police have done lots of work to change, like as a system, individual racism and bias, the unconscious stuff. I mean, the unconscious stuff, I can't even believe I said that because I don't really subscribe to unconscious bias. I'm like, it is what it is. It's racist, all of that kind of stuff. But for the most part, people think of racism in the overt sense, like when you call someone of color, whatever names, when you target them, because when it's a conscious targeting, that's actually not the issue that happens, but the most dangerous way, the most dangerous issues, we just look at the system structures. Who's most likely children to be removed from their whānau? Who's most likely to decide to like actually stop someone on the street and ask them questions? I mean, if we look at that, case in point, that national fellow guy, Sam Affendale. So when he was a youth, what would the system recognise as a violent youth offender, except he wasn't charged and prosecuted. He wasn't, and a lot of that comes from privilege and his whiteness. Like, we can't deny that. It's not about him as an individual, but I think that speaks to a very clear example. And he could go on to life and become an MP in this country and get paid like $170K a year. And no doubt, I assume has contributed positively in his life, like he's given opportunity. if he was a brown boy, that would not have happened. This is not a question. That would not have happened. And we have to go, why? But also the solution, my solution is not he should have got locked up. I'm actually like, everyone should, all our whānau should also have equally the chance to make mistakes, be punished for them, and then dealt with it and supported in different whānau. And yeah, like I could see someone in the comments talking about what happened with Materia, who literally, like, I'm all about it. I'm such a Robin Hood about how you deal with the tūre Pākehā. I'm just like, with white man's law, I'm just like, does it actually address harm? Does it actually bring justice? Is it actually the right thing to do? It's very different. Just because, yeah, anyway.
Well, that's the thing, like to say, going back to Sam, and as you say, it's not actually about the individual, but it's the different response.
Yes.
And to me as a mother, I went, why as a whānau do you go, he did that horrible thing there, I know, I'll just put him in another private boarding school. You know, like, to me as a whānau, you'd respond in a different way. So yeah, that's me putting my Māori lens and judging them as a family, but it happens to us all the time, just widely. Could I bring us to constitutional transformation, and that is the vision of Mātike Mai. Tell us about your experience with Mātike Mai and your beliefs and hopes for it, how you give people the 101 on it.
Right. All right. I suppose it's just like, first and foremost, for quite often, I think probably in the whānau and communities who are tuning into this kōrero, constitutional transformation is a kupu just chucked out there. I'm hearing it lots in like a Wellington-centric kind of life, but for my understanding of it is like the Constitution is really just a foundation of relationship and rules of which we all choose to, it's a tikanga. It should be really a tikanga, a set of rules of how we should relate to each other, and who, it comes down to power, who has the power, and how decisions are made. So in New Zealand, we have an unwritten constitution. So lots of people hear the United States talk about, the Constitution, it's written, blah, blah, blah. But we actually have a lot of different, and I learned this like after law school. I didn't even learn it at law school. I was like very confused what the Constitution was. So it's not a normal accessible part of what everyone should know about. But we all are affected by the Constitution in terms of who has power, makes decisions, how rules are exercised. Like te tiriti or waitangi is one part of our Constitution, all of that kind of stuff. So what the Mai Tiki Mai is, as I understood it, and so Margaret Mutu and Moana Jackson led that review. It was looking at what would government at the time had set up some white working group to talk about the Constitution, to go, should we have a written Constitution? Like things like, should we be a republic? Does the Queen even matter to us? What should our Constitution look like? Tamir.
It's about 2009, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like, it was ages ago. Well, yeah, it was ages ago. And what happens, Mata, Wana and Margaret Mutu and other whānau were like, hey, but Māori, we have a different idea of what the Constitution, well, we probably will, but we should be asked. And we're going to need a Māori, we should be asked in ways that are Māori. So wānanga and all of that. Matua, Moana, Margaret Mutu ran thousands of hui. And that's cups of tea. That's not like a convention centre or whatever. It's just like thousands of hui around the country with our whānau. And I was at law school at that time. I have very little active role in it. It's just something I knew was happening. If people like Veronica Tawhai running, people running hui and going to hui. And so I also, part of that was recognising rangatahi, we also need to have a voice. So there was a bunch of rangatahi that were asked to run the hui. I think I went to a few to like run it, to talk about the Constitution. So I was forced to learn what the Constitution was. At the end of that was Mai Tiki Mai. It's a report, you can Google it. It will be maybe Auckland Women's Centre can post a link to it. And that was the culmination of what all the whānau said, the thousands of hui that they hosted for whānau said about what does the Constitution look like for Māori. And inherently at the heart of it for me, you know, there's some parts of like Te Tiriti that sits in the heart of it. It's the relationships, like the ability to make decisions for ourselves, the ability to, the Crown and Māori to exist in relationship truly. You know, there's lots of different sorts of things around what constitutional transformation, you know, the articulation of that. At the end of the day, for me, fundamentally, it is really just the role for us not to be the exception. It is the role, it is as Māori, where we're not succeeding in spite of a kawana funded and driven system. Ahako, like whatever the name is, they can put Māori policies in, or I could be running the police. It does not make it, will not transform in the way that is necessary for it to be of service to our whānau. You know what I mean? Like to allow us to, I don't know.
And actually on that, so Kiritapu Allen, you know, in the role that she has as minister, and I see you smile, but what you're saying is it's not just about that one Māori person at the head, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, as Māori, we know we don't exist as on our own anyway. It's not about the individual, but you can't have it inherently kind of like racist pakarui car. Like you can't just change the driver of it, or you can't just change the passengers in it. We can make it less shit. Like I always refer to things being less shit. Like we can cause less harm in those processes, but we are not of those processes. We inherit symptoms of that. We inherit layers of perhaps like trauma and more barriers to just existing, I suppose, and having the ability to make decisions for ourselves and be heard and honored and all of that kind of stuff. You just cannot replace, like I could be every single social worker in Oranga Tamariki, like every social worker could be Julia Whaipooti, and it would not change the hara of that system and process. Well, it would be a bit better, guys. I would make it a bit better. Like, but at the heart of it, it wouldn't actually change things. So it's not about tutuing with a system that does not work and is not of us, for us, but does stuff to us. We can't just tutu with it. I do think so. Think about Kiritapu as the example. That's a really important role that she occupies and holds, but also we can't be like, that is the solution. Our solution will never be in the kawana. What we need the kawana is to learn, the government is to learn how to trust us. Actually, we don't need to teach them to trust us because they never do, but they need to minimize their role. They need to get out of our lives, and they need to give us the money that they spend keeping us oppressed.
Kia ora. Because I just put in the chat a question that had come through with someone who obviously knows Matike Mai, but asks, what does it look like in a mainstream organisation? You've spoken to this a little bit already, or in somewhere like council. And then they mentioned, how can mainstream organisations support moving towards the triple sphere system? Now, I wanted to include a picture of the sphere, but basically, as you say, it's about more of a tiriti-based scenario where we have our spheres that we exist in, and then we need an organisation to interact with Māori, for instance. So can you speak to that? What does honouring Matike Mai look like in an organisation like, say, a council?
Okay, so well, I mean, there's layers of this. So like council, and it's more, you know, often like a go-to is like, oh, I'm going to open our hui with karakia. Those things are important. They're a practice in understanding why we do that and hold that space. But what can often happen is like, got to open up our hui and then straight into racist, white supremacist, like ignorant, no actual engagement with Māori policies, te the role of a council, for example, is actually about who's holding the power here in decision making. And if it is like, and then going, well, and it's not just about, oh, we're going to have mana whenua seats, which is an important aspect as well. You should know the whenua that you're on. You should know the history that you're on. You should know the actions of tipuna, of like the history of settlers, the violence that have occurred on that whenua, and has that been addressed? You know, like the knowledge base of that is really important. I think and maybe not just councils, but all, like schools, whatever, you have to understand the history of the land and the history and the responsibility of, I'm always referring to, so I have a tendency to refer to Pākehā and tangata tiriti. So Pākehā, back in the day, like the treaty was signed by white people. Powers and structures and our systems and our laws are written by and for and support white people. But New Zealand, that doesn't speak, like, just to address the sort of multicultural relationships that we have on our whenua. For me, it's like Māori, tangata whenua, tangata tiriti, you know, that's how I sort of language that. So more, but I do think a lot of the power and control sits within Pākehā systems and processes and the history that has sort of formed and benefiting. So I was going off there, but for council, it's really the questions like who has the power to make decisions, who has the resource, money, and all of that, how tangata whenua, mana whenua, being supported and resourced to actually make those decisions, contribute to those decisions, or do decisions for Māori in that construct. Like, those are the challenges. It's like, where does the power sit and how do we reallocate that power and resource? It's not just about asking Māori what you think. You need to truly support that to be given the space for that to happen.
Yeah, so Catherine's just said, as Anne Milne calls it, Māori curtains on a Pākehā window. So it's going to actually, in order to be transformational, a different way of engaging and some handing over of what feels like power. And that's usually not very easy or comfortable, and quite possibly why we're talking about it more than we see it in action at the moment.
Aye, for sure. And I think discomfort is a really important part of change. It is not saying this is easy. It is not, you know, whether you're consciously aware of it or not, but you get privilege, you're in like, it is actually giving up comfort. But actually there is a benefit for Pākehā, for Māori to have power over ourselves. I mean, unless you're comfortable turning, not acknowledging that. I kind of wish, like, what would that feel like? Not just have a mahi, we just get paid and go home and it's just your life. But actually, if there is a discomfort, that's kei te pai. You know, that's really important. You got to sit with it and go, why is this uncomfortable? Acknowledge it and then haere tonu. Like, this is not an easy, it should not be an easy thing. Should be easy, and it also is okay for it not to feel easy.
Yeah, for growth to feel like it has growing pains. So when we speak to matike mai, I guess another way that people might be hearing about it at the moment is co-governance. I personally thought we already covered this quite a while ago, dudes, but now we're back here again. So how do you help people through co-governance, or do you try to, or is it that same kōrero around it works for everybody? Or why do you think we're having such a little bit more hand-wringing about co-governance?
Oh, it's racism, like, it fully is. So, you know, you got like pretty loud voices who are very threatened. I mean, it's the same way that Whitakers have, like, I don't know, tiakari, or like whatever, the Māori chocolate. Like, yeah. Yes, we are delicious, but actually, like, the outrage that it triggers, you know, inherently within that person, where it's like, why are they angry? It's actually got nothing to do with the chocolate Māori. Like, that's racism at play. And then we also, like, pander that to that in decision making. When we think about co-governance, I'm not even about I'm like, because often, sometimes people get distracted. I've seen this, like, we've seen movements in, like, NGOs or whatever, where they're like, we need to make sure we have a Māori seat. And then the other seat is like a guaranteed non-Māori seat. And I was like, no, that's not how this works. But the intention, I get the intention about it. But if we think, I live in Wellington Central, and quite literally shit explodes on the streets because of poor counselling and investment in infrastructure and thinking about how we do water pipes. When I think about Māori and our care and relationship to whenua, and, like, the desire to truly be kaitiaki, to look after it, like the knowledge and mātauranga there. If we were at the decision-making table and could make stuff happen whenever this stuff got set up, we would not have shit on the street. And you cannot tell me that that's a bad thing for Pākehā and non-Māori. Probably not. Like in action, you think about that the generational thinking and how we invest and set up something is beyond our lifetimes. It is beyond, it's more than us. It's like, how do things exist?
Do you call it intergenerational mokopuna thinking? Is that what you call it?
I think so Tracy McIntosh, she's like doctor, professor, whatever, but she's like auntie to me, and I get free cookies. I love it. But she has I've heard her speak to this as mokopunatanga. And for me, like that's what I think about. It's like, yeah, we say intergenerational. You know, we're gonna die, and that's natural. But the measure for me of what good looks like is not about how much I die with what have I done in my life. It is actually like, what have I left? And I have been the benefactor of that, of living tipuna and those who have already passed on, who I don't even know what they've all done, but we stand on the shoulders of those that have gone and come before us, who hold us like floaties in the water, who let us see the world, who let us imagine more, who let us see and swim further than them. My mahi is to leave this, and I believe our tiakitanga, like our obligation, is that we care for this space like it's for others to exist in, not just for us. So it is that kind of thinking in the decision making around sewerage pipes in this country, in our streets. It is the decision making about how we resource and support our schools, kura, that kind of stuff. All of that level of thinking. If you have that vision beyond ourselves and the next generation, then things will be different and better for everyone. Literally, yeah.
Mokopunatanga. Now, I just wanted to ask you to step back into when you spoke about breaking up that word moko and puna being a pool of reflection. And can you explain to us mokopuna described in that way?
I'll say that, and then you can fix me, Stacey. But so the way it's been shared with me, and I've like immediately forgot like who told me that, but I carry with it because it's the way I understand it. So, you know, like we have tipuna, so we have ancestors, and like the puna being like our puna, you know,
pool.
I mean, yeah, our pool, like our pools. So for me, when I think of moko, so I'm literally like my moko's on my face, you know, I'm wearing my moko. That is a reflection of the pools of which I come from. So our tipuna, I am the moko, the reflection of my tipuna. I am also the puna for my mokos to look at. So I always think about that link. I think about it. It feels really vivid to me. It feels really clear to me that the things that I do will be reflected in my mokos to come. And we are all at the same time, we are all mokopuna and tipuna. We are all those things. And so, I think about the mokopuna being the reflections of us, and what have we done for them, you know, to be the reflections of we are constant. We are so connected, and you don't have choice about that, but we have responsibility and privilege and love for that.
And that while we're speaking to mokopuna and to children, you've said that working at the office for the Children's Commissioner showed you the things that make the biggest difference are all what you're talking about, aroha, feeling confident and belonging, and yet that's not reflected in government policy. So what do you think, is it policy change that that will make a difference? I guess you have to believe that because of the mahi that you do, or how do we make sure that that aroha actually comes through in law and policy?
I still don't care, but like the written stuff, so like law, policy, like I firmly believe it does not matter how much aroha we write into that, it will not change it. It will not change. It will not change where we need to be, because that is not where the change sits. It sits within our whānau and our communities. Literally, you know, often policy will be written and it'll be like, oh, what does that solo mama need to be able to look after her whānau and do whatever things. They'll be like, oh, is a program we need her to send through her CV quite a lot to apply for jobs that don't really exist, to get a mahi that we don't quite have, but that will cost more in childcare, you know, like it's all these barriers. So that's where those, I do think we need people, I do think that we have processes and systems that are void of care and aroha and connection and responsibility to those, to the puna that we are talking about and thinking about. And I think we need to shift power from there. Like, yeah, do that better. But we have some really good written laws. Like we have some good written stuff. And it has not changed fundamentally from the year I was born to now. You know, like I was born the year Puao Tatatu was released, which if you don't know about it, it's like this report into Māori in the government, how they shit at dealing with Māori and how we have bad outcomes. And then we also have like Matua's He Whaipoanga, which is the first Māori in the criminal justice system. Statistically, nothing has changed since that time, when those were released when I was born to now. I think the most change will come, like literally is money into the hands of whānau and communities. And I'm not void, like we have some generations within the same whānau where they've been caught in the system and are missing, you know, a ngaro to their own connections and support that they need. That is, we can break that. It took a few generations to create that, where it's going to become normal, but we can't just accept it to carry on. Like you just wrap around those whānau with our whānau and we resource us to be able to do that. Yeah.
Actually, someone, Sophie just asked if you could send the names for the reports, and we will do that in the chat. But if you just want to say them again so that perhaps...
Well, Tatatu.
Right.
And
the year was 19...
I would say 88. I was born in 88. And so that was published in 88, but it's like came out. So we just revolve around my birth year, Stacey, is really important. And He Whaipoanga Ho, which is Matua's Māori in the criminal justice system report that was written then. They looked at why so many of our whānau were incarcerated and locked up. And
Whaipoanga Ho, ka pai. Actually, that relates to a question that's come in, and you mentioned before that, you know, we're often internationally hot, nationally not, in terms of Indigenous law and being seen to be doing better than other Indigenous people. But a question that came in is, how is going to the United Nations a strategy that we as Māori can use? When is it useful and not so useful?
I can talk to my experience, and I have to say, so I went a few years ago to the UN rights on Indigenous people or Indigenous issues, because apparently we're not people, we're issues, but there's a hui that was held in New York, and I'm not even going to lie.
People's was a big deal, wasn't it? To say people's was a really big deal.
Yeah, it was. And I would not even lie, like I had zero interest in the UN and like didn't even know what the point is. Like we have tribunal, you know, like if I'm annoyed, I'm going to go talk on the news, you know, like, I mean, it's not that simple, but yeah, we have a lot of tools here. So I didn't really care about the UN until I had to care about the UN. And partially was, so like, I don't know, it would be 5 years ago, I can't remember. But when National was in and Judith Collins was Minister for Justice, and I remember she announced building a mega prison in Waikeria. So we've got Waikeria prisons already there. And they were going to expand it, make it a mega prison. And then it was election year. And so a bunch of us were lobbying to be like, no, don't build prisons. Don't do that, because you build them, you fill them. So fundamentally prisons are bad. It's millions of investment. Like we spend like 100K, 120K now, inflation, 130K, like to keep a person in a prison bed, that kind of stuff. It's all bad. So we're all lobbying to be like, don't do that. Then Labour got in, which was awesome. And I had like met with all the Labours beforehand, being like, you're not going to build a prison. And then they didn't commit to it. So I remember having a hui with like Jacinda and Calvin. And for me, it was very simple. Like it was just this young buck being like, this is the issue. This is the solution. Why are you not doing that? I was just so like not having a bar of it. Then they got in, Calvin became minister, and it became apparent like to all of us that they were just going to carry on with it. Like it was just, and they had said stuff like, oh, it's out of our hands, it's already in motion, that kind of stuff. And then this hui was happening in the UN, and I was just like, I'm going to go dob on them. I'm going to go dob on our government to the United Nations. And that honestly was like my driving force. I was very like, this is, you know, I've got to do everything I can. And I have to say, like, like the force of which I and it's still do, and I think it's an important thing to hold on to, like the mamai I would feel about it, like if this happens then we've just like given up and heaps of our whānau are going to be locked up, which is true, and then we have more whānau suffering, you know, it just makes the issue bigger. So I went to the UN and I had such a rude awakening and learning there, because there was many Indigenous peoples from around the world, and I'm just all like Māori, you know, like, which is important. And I'm like often Ngati, or Te Whānau, Te Whakiru, you know, like you just think in our world. And I went there and I could see people looking to us as the solution and the hope, or, you know, as Māori, because we have our reo, we are visible, we have our, you know, you can see us, we have a lot of different, we have a treaty, we have all of these things. And before the UN hui happened, that, or the UN, like whatever it was, formally, so the day before they had an Indigenous like caucus. And what we learned while I was there was that there was some whānau who were there the year before that weren't there to like that day, and they were acknowledged because where they were from, it was so illegal, they would be killed for talking about being Indigenous. So it was like all of this huge stuff going on, and for me, where I could see all of these Indigenous peoples looking to us as to kind of, but as the finish line. And I remember, yes, I did end up speaking in a random time, so it was very random how it happened, but I ended up dobbing on our government. That person like that didn't get built, so we'll take it, you know, and then they got streamed home and we just sort of social media'd it or whatever. And I remember during that time though, I didn't really have full appreciation for the costs of what the UN meant for whānau, what it meant for Māori. Actually, it was Mata Moana who, so Tina Ngata was there talking about the doctrine of discovery, and she became like forced to kind of to men. There was like 10 of us, young buck Māoris, who were just like, probably not accountable, you know, like I was just like, I'm just going to go be here, you know, we're not holding the weight of what has come before us. And Mata Moana in his gentle way had sent through, you know, messages of support, but to remind us of actually the importance of the UN as a tool and as a vehicle, because there was some of us in Aotearoa, I mean, I was just so focused on that kaupapa, that's all I cared. I was just so narrow about I needed to do this because I was just carrying the weight of like, if I don't do it, the person's going to get it. Like, that's how I'm sort of like my dramatic advocacy is. But we, you know, had some young bucks with us as well, who also I could understand that were showing up to her and standing up on behalf of New Zealand as Māori and being like, you know, the UN's been racist and the processes that they run, and really is. It's like Pākehā systems on steroids. It's not a good, I think it's not accessible and all of that. But the reminder to us is that the United Nations in that experience and in the generosity and kindness of I would say it's the vision of growling I'd get from Mata Moana. I know that now to be a growling, but it's not, you would never know it's a growling. You think you're just sipping orange juice and having a chat. But to know the weight and the importance of that place, not just for us, but for internationally, like that is for many whanaunga overseas, that is it. That is their hope. That is their system. That is their, you know, last port of formal call where they can go to try and be heard. I do think so. In summary, I'd say the UN has an important role to make. Definitely go dob on the governments. I was like way more out the gate about doing it. I was like, how it happened. I'm grateful that it did happen. I learned a lot in that process, and also I'd like to say that was like contributed as well to the decision being reversed at that moment in time. Although what we learned in that advocacy as well, it's not just that decision, you know, they come out in different ways, you know, and then the millions get spent somewhere else, but it doesn't it's not the fundamental change. It didn't bring about the fundamental change we need. It just gave us time to have a breath, you know, breathe. It's like, okay, the hara is less now.
So you see the opportunity of the lever,
yes,
but don't necessarily respect the institution, but respect the danger that it presents to some Indigenous people to even be present.
100% all of that. But what I think is that Pākehā systems appreciate themselves, and the UN is one of those. So the thing, like, New Zealand hates to get embarrassed about stuff. Definitely going to the UN it is a lever. It's a tool in a kiti to be used, and we shouldn't shy away from that.
And you've been quite mindful and always understood the power of media, have you? Because that's how I first came to know of you, as a really impressive commentator. Did that come naturally to you? Was it strategic, or was it just you going, hang on a minute, this needs to happen, this is just messed up, and finding yourself in there?
Probably the latter. Like, yeah, no, not at all. Like in the first years, like when I was in the media, it would be like, we've got to fix the things. I literally used to be like, so I'm part of a rōpū called JustSpeak. So it was a bunch of young, but mainly Pākehā, actually, law students who were like, this justice system's really munted, it's really broken, and it is. We need to fix things about it. And part of it, back at that time, the common commentator on prison stuff was this Pākehā, very racist, bad, like, commentary. So media were just going to him, because I've learned, now I can learn, you know, you just go, we get the easier grads, but it's pretty much like, build more prisons, get more police, get some guns, you know, like that was the constant rhetoric. It was. And so we were always like, oh, and Mata Kim Wickman for a lot of his work, and he would be trying to be that voice. So JustSpeak, part of it was like, we need to change the narrative. It was not at all a plan. Like, I was not like, I need to do that. It was just like, anytime we got asked, we were like, we have to talk, because otherwise they're going to talk to this fella. And they are, but we've just got to start doing it so that there's other voices. And so that's how it happened. It was more like, and I was just happened to be me in those moments of time. And talking comes naturally to me. I won't lie. I'll be like, yeah, I'll talk. But I honestly would be like, I have to. I used to feel like in the 30 seconds or whatever they talk, I have to get it right, because it's the only opportunity we have. So every time I'd be like, it's the only opportunity we have. So I used to feel that responsibility, like, oh, I have to do this way. And so it sort of just happened by accident, because I would always say yes, not because I like want to be on the news. I was like, have to do it, because otherwise it's just this fella and this is just how it is. So I was always saying yes, and luckily I had the generosity and support of people around. But I was just like, and unfortunately, and it's still true today, that the messages didn't really change, because it was just saying it often, you know, like, yeah.
So always leaning back on that really punitive nature, straight from, you know, straight out of colonial,
right,
going, people are bad, lock them up, and then we can feel safer.
Yeah. And so changing that, I think, so the first few years was just like, I have to say yes and say the stuff. There came a moment in time where I've realized, well, I've learned, and I have responsibility around it, that there is responsibility into how I use those spaces. It wasn't enough just to be like, I'm just young, I'm just going to do it, because, like, not that I was thinking like that, but once you know, I couldn't unknow the responsibility of that. I can't just keep going on without strategy, without being accountable, you know, all that sort of stuff, which I already was. But it was recognizing things have shifted, landscape has shifted, what's my responsibility and role within our collective. I might be the māngai, I might front something, so I might be a visible person within these kōrero, but it's not my kōrero. That's just my role in those times. But what is the best way to use media as a tool to shift the minds and hearts of our whānau and our country? And that's still a learning thing. I also, you know, as I shifted, and not just becoming mama, but shift, like, I will go silent. Like right now I'm at the, you know, working in the Royal Commission, looking at state care abuse. I'll go silent on those commentating, because the cost of that, you know, I go hard serving whānau within their changes in different ways. I do think media has an important role. I do feel that it's hard, like we sort of just want this like rōpū of whānau who can go out and speak into this, who are given the time, and so we can continue to have a bigger media strategy, but it sort of doesn't work.
Actually, you said the key thing, who's given the time and who are the time givers. So the people who get to choose who the commentators are,
right,
quite often we expect them to have a wider base of knowledge than they do, or
right,
contact list. So if I get asked to do 10 things, 9 of them I'll direct them in the way of the Māori they should be speaking to. But
right,
happen to be the one they know.
Oh.
So that laziness and one particular mindset of journalism is an issue that we have to work on as well. I liked your recollection of Matua Moana's quiet telling off, and how, I guess, with his perspective of time, which was exceptional, and the way that he could oversee things, he could see the phase and the experience that you were having from afar. But you did say to me and share with me earlier on that you do have a patience around transformation and what it looks like and how long it takes.
I have an impatience around it. So in terms of time, I think like the things that have shifted from my birth year to now, substantively has not changed. Like the number of our whānau incarcerated, the number of our mokopuna being stolen by the state, the number of our whānau being abused, all of that kind of stuff. I'm like, nothing has changed yet. So much has changed at the same time. So you got to take that, you've got to acknowledge it to go. I mean, I've had yarns with Matsumoana for lots of times. Great English, Julia. But people, whānau, rangatira like him and of that generation, even living now, I think about Annette Sykes, I think about lots of whānau who are fighting the fight, who got, and Tamuiti's done his, he's got his like, I will not speak Māori exhibition sort of happening. That is in their lived lifetime. Like there's different violent experiences that we would not accept because we are allowed to not accept it. We're like, that is wrong, but in that time, death threats, literal threats to day-to-day life for a generation of advocates and fighters. Now that doesn't exist. And so it means we've got different barriers to shift it, to change up the substantive, realities for our whānau to exist in whatever we need to do. We can see and have the opportunity to move further because of that mahi. So a lot has changed. And also, so both of those things can be true at the same time. I think when I think about my tiki mai and Matua Moana, and I was thinking about his tangi, it was like the ultimate wānanga, like it was such a him. I was like, really annoying that you've done this. But actually, because it's not one person's journey, it never is. But there were so many people, we're all connected in different ways. I feel, and now I've got my baba, Arawa taupari, and she's 1.5. I think I want, what is my role in my living lifetime left? I'm like, that is generations of work. What is our role in terms of putting into action transformation of the Constitution? What does that look like? We have to give life to it. So there's importance to have kōrero about it, but there's such hard action attached to it. And I feel quite, I'm 34 now, and in that many years ahead, I'll still be like going hard, and I'll have like 10 mokopuna hopefully, but that things will change then. That is my job now, and we've been given the tools of time of te puna past and present to actually go, what we've been gifted, the time, relationships, mātauranga, connections. It's not me, I'm not going to change it, it's us. And so I've got, if I think about the prison system, in my lifetime there will not be prisons. There will not be prisons. And with that will be the social enriching of our whānau communities. That is my commitment. And so every decision that I make within the collective is to go, what do we need to do to make that so? And I just think it's so possible. At the heart of it, there's so much shit we can talk about. Yeah, it is shit. It really is. Like, all the bad stuff, racism, conflict, there's living things that are hurting our whānau every day. That is bad. And that doesn't change, but my focus very much is, all right, what are we going to do to make that not so? And so what is our jobs? We're connected, I think about our justice system. Yeah, if I'm speaking in the media, if there is a vehicle to enable that every single day, we've got whānau that need social services, and we have colonized contracting models that go into like whatever NGOs with very little resource, not necessarily the capability to serve our whānau. That still needs to happen. I'm like, cool, we need to structure that up so that we are connected. And then every day we have whānau going in and out of prisons. I've got not enough lawyer mates now. Like, we have done this and we have walked this together. We have a responsibility to link these things up and push for the change in our lifetimes. I will not have my kid be my age and hopefully give me about 5 more kupuna by then. And the things have not shifted. That is our responsibility, to have the luxury of the time, the thinking space. Well, I do. I can speak for me. I know not everyone does, but that's my responsibility now, to use that gift and the koha of transmission of the mahi that's come before us to make the changes happen in my lifetime. That is my job, and that's how I feel.
I like how you say how your patience and impatience can coexist when you have that clarity of mokopunatanga. And I believe that you name-checked Tracy McIntosh, and she's in the messages. Like, no pressure, but it's a lovely kōrero that I will read out, and I don't think Tracy can unmute herself, but saying, Moana knew that there was so much mahi to be done, but was so heartened that Julia and other young people have the power and the aroha to create real positive change for our people. Big love, Julia, speaking your truth and speaking our truth. As like you say, Moana, right to, after death, ensure that wānanga continue. And that wahine spoke at his tangi. What are your recollections already that are standing out in your mind from the tangihanga?
Firstly, kia ora, Tracy. You want to sub out? You jump in. But for me, it was a wānanga. What my reflections on it, it's taken a bit of time, like many people are really hurting around him leaving Tinana, but he's still very much here, and I think that's the koha of him and his, I'll say, wānanga-tangi. He was, I know he had set up 3 kind of things he had wanted to happen, which was that wahine would speak, which has happened. I'm from Coast as well. That was it's not exceptional, but it's become exceptional over time. And that's for ia hapu ia iwi. I'm not going to even touch on that here because I don't think that's the place to do that. But, wanted wahine to speak at his tangi on the pai. He didn't want any religious, Christian karakia or structures attached to his tangi because of, he couldn't unknow in the work that he had done in terms of the abuse that Christian institutions have had on our whānau and on our people at the tools of Christianity. And a lot of that, so that was his thinking. And the extra one, and I'm not a haka free keeper, was that there wouldn't be haka at his tangi, and part of that was that how he had seen in his views. And this is I'm not matua, so I'm just translating it Whaipooti tanga, but it's in my interpretation. And he probably said something way different. I'm like, oh, this is what I've heard. But was that how that has changed in living memory, how haka has become more aggressive and masculine, so it's become a different kind of way that he thought that our tipuna had meant for it to be, was my interpretation of some of the yarns that we had around that. But what I saw how that played out in his wānanga-tangi was that it challenged lots of people, so there was kōrero about it, so it brought to life the kōrero, the wānanga of it, and also even just the people that came, so from all over the place, from Māori, not Māori, from all different whakapapa was beautiful, and all different ages, the presence of rangatahi and all of that. And I think for me, the way I thought about it was that this was a in his leadership, and he is the most So people, I think he's very gentle. So people sometimes can be interpretation of him as you miss the strength of how strong he is to have done what he had done, but that it was more than him. So he's like this tōtara that's fallen, but he had shed seeds his whole life, and that was such a visual came to fruition in his tangi when you see the whānau that came. And I think what he left us, which is where I feel so strong about it, you know, when I talk about in my lifetime things will change, there will not be prisons in my lifetime. It's because it just like sprinkled seeds, and there's heaps of us growing. And it's not like none of us need to be one huge humongous tree, but we all need to, I want to use the word army, but essentially it's like we've got an army of, you know, transformers amongst us, of mokopuna. First and foremost, we have an army of mokopuna who are going to go out and make this stuff happen. And I know Tracy's on, when I've like sort of met her and Matamana at the same time, then I'm an abolitionist now, very strongly. I can articulate that. What does that mean? And that comes from the OG in my world, which is Tracy.
Kia ora. And I love that. I'm really enjoying how you're saying you can work in these areas of law and policy, don't really care about that. UN, not a big deal. So that inherent still understanding of what works and not needing to respect things just because that's the current structure. I would like to talk to you about your moko kauai, if that's all right. And we have extended our time a little bit. I'll be interested to see if this time works for people, or if we just go 8:30, kids got to be in bed, maybe that is actually the time that works. So if you do have questions while I ask Julia this last part, you can put them in the chat now, and we'll wind up in the next 10 minutes, but we'll see if you guys are still there, if you're just already out because of time, and that's just understanding live. So ka e hara I te mea he e whai pānga ana ki a koe, nā te mea tino rekara wātu tēnei kōrero. I know that you've all really enjoyed Julia's kōrero. I can feel it actually. But in terms of your moko kauai, was it always something you imagined for yourself? And I know that you spoke about your mum as well, or was it timing? Is there anything that you'd be willing to share with us about why you chose and when you chose?
Yeah, for sure. So mine's probably like a few years ago, 3 years oldish. And I think wahine Māori are beautiful, because we are, guys. But I've always looked at wahine with kauai, and I thought, man, you're beautiful, and I hope one day that I can do that. And that I could be that. But I so distant from that. Like I was so like, I need to be matatai te reo Māori. I need to be at home. I need to be all these things. And I held on to that. So it was like this secret hope of mine, but it was something that I never thought I would realize, because I was like, I'm never going to be all of those things that I was thinking I need to be. And then really how it fast forwarded was that we had a mokopapa up home in Wharekahika, so up home on the coast at one of our marae Hinemodia, which is actually, my daughter's name's Rua Taupari, and Hinemodia is her mum. And obviously I didn't have her before then, but one of my aunties, I was on my honeymoon, very hungover in Mexico, so it was not a very romantic sort of thing. And one of my aunties messaged me, and she was like, oh, awesome, you're married now, whatever. She was just saying whatever. She's like, we've got mokopapa at home, so you need to, that will be you then. And I was like, oh, all the things that I felt, my secret feelings about that. I was like, oh, thanks, Auntie, I'm not too, whatever. I didn't really say anything. I didn't respond properly to that. And then I spoke with my wife, who's Pākehā woman. And then I was like, oh, and I talked to her about it, but was sort of, I can't really do it. And then in that small time, so also whanaunga from home is te ngāti and all of them, I just started looking up kōrero about it, or like my auntie was telling me stuff. And it was at that moment in time, hungover on a beach in Mexico, where I was reading those things. I sort of, that was the reach. Well, clearly I'm rubber arms for days, because it did not take a lot for me to be like, this is the right thing to do. But I was reading this, and when I realized, I will, and I was already like strongly, unapologetically Māori, advocating for our rights, for all the stuff, get out of our way, I can do that. It was just on those missions. And then I'm reading, learning about it from my auntie, was like how that whakaaro that I had is colonized, how it's grounded in, the merit, or that you need to earn it, whereas this is mine and it always has been. Stacey, yours is yours and it always will be, whether or not, you take that or not. Like that's not my decision. It's yours only, however you do that. So I was like, who am I to be fighting for these things? And at the same time, in my own, for me, to say, oh, it's not for me because of exactly the things I've thought about. And so on that beach, I was like, oh yeah, no, I will. And then my wife went to sleep with me being like, oh, I don't think I can, whatever, auntie's blah, blah. And then she woke up and I was like, oh no, I've decided I'm going to do it. And she was like, I can't keep up. So that's how I decided to do that, was because I was ready for me on that kōrero. I was like, actually, I'm a really fast moving, righteous, like fire. What does my puku tell me? And that's how that happened. But I had whānau who let me do that. And then I actually, when I got home, I went and told mum. And my mum, like when I said earlier, like when she moved us to Australia, was to protect us from her experience of being Māori as well, as my take on that. And I said, Mum, I'm going to our moko papa. I want you to come with me because it's ours. This is where we're from. Mm. And then Mum, and at no point in my life have I ever heard my mum like talk to this. And then she said, oh, that's, in that kōrero, she said, that's great, more or less summary. She was like, because I had a dream that I was meant to get a moko kauai and you're going to do that for us. Mm. And then when I couldn't unhear that, and I was like, well, so then I knew that Mum had this secret desire too to wear one. Yeah. And I just said, well, I was like, mine is mine. It's actually not ours, even though it is. It's more than that. But I was like, yours is yours, Mum. I'm not getting mine until you've gotten yours. Mm. And then equally, so like how I was hungover on the beach and like reading stuff and be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. So I shifted from my mum was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then we went into that moko papa, and then we wear our moko on the outside. And so that's how that happened. And
sorry to interrupt, but that's a beautiful dual permission and empowering. But yeah, all those things are what we have to do to qualify. All we have to do is be, wahine Māori. Yeah, he tika tau. And then I also think it's good to normalise the range of hungover we might have about it, or friends of mine who've gone, yeah, I do want to, but I'm just a bit vain. Like the whole the whole range.
It's really fine. And not to take away, like back in the day, it wasn't a political thing. It is still partially still political now. And so the decision is hard. It's not as easy. It's everyone's decision. And I know once I took it, or once someone takes it, like we are forever, we are literally marked. And you have to be ready to own what that looks like for you.
Mm. Pai. O tēnā rawa atu koe wena kōrero hohu nu rawa atu. And thank you for sharing that, and to your mama as well. Because everyone I work with, Julia's cousin, and I didn't really see the resemblance. He's a man until we talked tonight, and I can see it's like parts of your face and some of the words you say and the way that you say them, like gora mahi and things like that. And it's beautiful, it's beautiful. I love your cousin, by the way. I've only worked with him for a short time. He's such a good man, and I see maybe a theme in your whānau. And I think he thinks you're quite bossy, but that's just because he's a boy.
He was my baby cousin. I was the boss for sure.
Yeah. Always that baby. But just quickly, we're also reminding people to please put in your feedback for the link that we have there. And just one final quick question. It's quite a big one, but what does mana wahine mean to you?
Oh, that's quite a big one. Why don't we start with you, Stacey? Your mana wahine, what does it mean for you?
Well, it's interesting because I think the recent interpretations are different. And it's a catchphrase, and that goes to show that our reo is evolving because we're using it in different ways. But it's about land, you know, and the sense why we needed to talk about mana wahine is to remind us of our Māori understanding of the mana of women, which was like, say, in the incantation that I gave at the beginning, that it's the power of women to continue whakapapa, and a mana that is inherent, like you say, you don't need a qualification to wear it.
Yeah, that is me. Mana wahine is the mana inherent in wahine, which is like, that doesn't answer the question. Like, I can't say it better. It's like there is a mana inherent in tani, and there's a mana inherent in wahine. And for me, yeah, it's exactly those things. There's a beautiful, strong, amazing thing of which we carry as wahine, and
and that you embody very much, and we've loved this kōrero tonight. Thank you for all you offer. Thank you for your aroha, so people know about your wit and they know about your intellectual vigor, but it's actually your aroha and your determination and responsibility to our people and to make things better for mokopuna tanga. No reira, e kore e mimitsi ngā mihi ki a koe. Hikurangi maunga, tū mai, tū rangatira mai, tēnei te mihi kau anu atu, ki a koe o tira ki a koutou koto whānau. And I'd just like to reiterate what everyone said, to thank our interpreters, Laura and Bridie. Have you ever been told by interpreters you're quite hard to sign for? I think you might be.
Oh, aroha atu, Laura, Bridie, aroha atu. I know. I think, when I'm in hui, I'm like, I've got to slow down, but actually, I'm sorry. Mihi atu kia korua, and to making this kōrero accessible for our whānau, for tangata tūri.
Kia ora. Yeah, she gives no apologies, but she did just then. So I will offer us a karakia to ease us away from this particular space, but to give thanks to everything that you've offered, all of the tupuna you've spoken of, all of the wairua that you've spoken of, and to make sure that we are nourished, because you should know that we're just a small sample of all the wahine that sit in awe of your mahi and are there as cheerleaders for you as well. Te whakaeatanga e, tēnei te kaupapa kāia, tēnei te wānanga kāia. Ko te mauri o te kaupapa ka whakamoia, ko te mauri o te wānanga ka whakamoia. Ko a kirunga, ko a kiraro, haumie, hui e tai ki he. Tēnā rawa atu koe, Julia, koutou katoa. Kia ora, ngā mana ki tanga.